Hey guys, I'm Steven from Curvy Woodworking. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made my Misty Mountain carving.
The first step is to get our 2-inch poplar. We're going to cut it to the proper dimensions. Then we're going to take it through the planer to make sure that we have a square top. And we're going to square it all off with one another when we pass it through the joint. Now when we do the glue up, we're going to have a solid bond between each of the pieces of wood. And we're going to make sure there's no gaps in between. Before I started carving, I marked everything out with a rough design that I wanted it to become. So I wanted to go with one of my previous trips on my trip to Japan, visiting Mount Fuji. So it's going to be a solid mountain with a couple clouds coming through at the peak. Similar to my other carvings I've completed before, you can watch my YouTube channel to see how I incorporate them into my furniture design. I'm using a carbide tooth disc on my grinder attachment. So that's going to be a bunch of carbide teeth, and it stops it from clogging up when you're doing the cuts throughout. I'm going to be taking a total of 3 passes through on this carving. First one's going to be to set the overall design shape in a 2D pattern. I'm going to keep a constant depth for this. The second pass is going to be to add depth to the individual carving. So if I want more contours from a 2D perspective, then you're going to be able to make that pass through on the second try. And the third one's just going to be to smooth over the roughness as much as I can before I start to sand. It was difficult to see before, but now you can start to see the mountain shape. So in the top left corner we have the sun beaming through, and that's the squiggly lines you see over there. In the top right corner you have the clouds. I want the clouds to seem like a whole different texture, so later on we're going to be incorporating a separate carving in there, and that's just going to be a very shallow to not give it the same amount of depth that the mountain has. I don't want to take away the attention from the teeth. But you can see the long carving edges I have on the left side and the right side coming down, and that's the exterior of the mountain. Everything else that you see in between is the contours of the mountain. Now that the roughing for the mountain is done, we're going to take our very light pass through the cloud section. So that we want to put a little bit less of depth in the clouds, and that's going to add a different texture to the piece. Your eyes are going to be focused on the mountain and the depth of the carvings. If you look a little closer, you're going to notice that the clouds also have very light fluff going throughout them. Now for the sanding, I gotta quicken through this whole process. It takes around the same amount of time that the carving takes, but it's a lot more boring and you can't really see anything happening. For this, I'm going to start with a 60 grit sandpaper, then work my way through up to 80, 120, and 220 grit sandpaper. Now depending on the color of wood you want, you can go up to 320, 420 to give it more of a polished look. The reason I stopped at 220 is it still allows some of the pores in the wood to be open, which allows it to accept more stain within the wood, and then you're going to see a darker textured look throughout the whole piece. If you go up to 320, you're going to notice that the dark walnut stain will be less and less potent as you go higher. I'm not just going to add stain on the front, I'm also going to do it on the back. The reason I'm doing it on the back is just to seal the wood so no moisture can penetrate. It's already warping, I don't want it to warp more than it already is. So for the front, I'm going to start by staining on the sides, and we want to put a generous amount on the piece. So we're going to let it seep in for around 15 minutes before we wipe off the excess material, and then you're going to get a finished look. Now with the Danish oil alone, I could use this as a finished piece. However, I want to allow more reflection in the piece, so I'm going to be using a high gloss lacquer finish. This is going to allow the light to reflect off and show those contours with more depth. First thing I'm going to do is put a sealer coat across the entire carving. So the first coat of the sealer is just to allow the pores to allow those random strands of wood to protrude upwards. So I'm going to take a 320 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand off those rough edges that protrude as soon as the pore penetrates with the sealant. Now for the high gloss finish, I'm going to be putting 2 coats of it. This is just precautionary. If you do a solid first coat, you should be good. However, 2 coats, 3 coats, 4 coats, however high you want to go, is just to make sure that you catch every single contour. Now the high gloss finish is lacquer based, but when we put it into the spray nozzle, we're also going to add 10% of catalyzer. That's going to help to harden the piece quicker, and we're also going to be adding 25% lacquer thinner, and that's going to allow to flow throughout the nozzle more easy so it doesn't gum up and have any inconsistencies while it's being sprayed.
Thanks for watching our video on how we put this carving together. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that alert button. If you want to see some previous content where we incorporate our carvings into furniture, be sure to watch how we put together our jukebox.